In 1989, a man from California stood in a round pen at Windsor Castle with a horse he had never met. He had no rope. He did no whip. He did not touch the animal at all. He simply stood there, and he moved, and he turned his shoulders, and he looked away at particular moments, and after about half an hour the horse walked across the pen and put its head against his shoulder and followed him wherever he went. Watching from the side, in a headscarf, was a 63-year-old woman who had been around horses since she was 4 years old and who had been Queen of the United Kingdom for 37 years. She had never seen anything like it, and what she did next changed that man's entire life and eventually reached a great many soldiers who had come home from wars and could not talk to anybody about it. I am Richard, and this is Richard Valentin. Now, a small correction on my own title, and I am going to do it quickly tonight because I made rather a meal of it last week, and one correction per program delivered at length is quite enough for anybody. The title says The Late Queen's Private Project. That is not quite right. It was not her project. It was his. What she did was see it, believe it, and then use the one thing she had that nobody else on earth had, which was the ability to make the world take something seriously simply by being interested in it. That is a smaller role than founding something. It is also, I would argue, the more useful one, and it is very characteristic of how she operated for 70 years. Let me tell you who the man is. His name is Monty Roberts. He is American, he is from California, and he is now in his 90s. He is generally described as the original horse whisperer, and that phrase needs a bit of untangling. There is a novel called The Horse Whisperer, written by Nicholas Evans, published in 1995 and made into a film in 1998 with Robert Redford. It was enormous. Most of you will have seen it or read it. Roberts is widely said to have been an inspiration for the central character, Tom Booker. Although I should tell you that Evans himself has said he met Roberts only once, and that the character was based on several different people. So the connection is real, but looser than the legend suggests, and I would rather give you that than the tidy version. What matters is that Roberts's methods predate all of it. They go back to 1947, when he was a 12-year-old boy in Nevada, spending extended time watching a herd of wild mustangs. And what he says he worked out, at 12, is this, that the horses were communicating with each other constantly, through body position, through where they pointed their eyes, through the angle of their shoulders, that it was a language, and that if it was a language, then a human being could learn it. Now, I want to explain what he actually developed, because I think it is genuinely beautiful, and I have never heard it explained properly on television. He calls it join up. You put an unbroken horse in a round pen. The horse does not know you, and if it has been handled roughly, has every reason to be frightened of you. You do not chase it. You do not catch it. What you do is send it away. You square your shoulders to it and you look directly at its eyes, which in the language of horses is what a predator does, and the horse moves off around the pen. And then you wait and you watch for signals. The inside ear locking onto you, the head lowering, licking and chewing. Those are not tricks. In a herd, those are the signals a young horse gives to say it accepts the terms. And when you see them, you do the thing that makes the whole method work. You turn away. You drop your eyes, you turn your shoulders 45 degrees, and you stop asking. And the horse, which has been told it may go, chooses instead to come. It walks across the pen and puts its nose on your shoulder, and from then on it follows you. That is join up. It takes, typically, less than half an hour with a horse that has never been handled. And I want you to notice what the actual mechanism is, because it is the entire point of tonight's program. You do not take the trust. You make it safe to give, and then you stop asking, and the animal decides. Now, why was this controversial? Because of what horse breaking had been for about 4,000 years. The word itself tells you, breaking. You broke a horse. The traditional method, across most cultures, and certainly across the American West, was to overwhelm the animal until it stopped resisting. You tied it, you got on it, and you stayed on it until it gave up. It worked, in the sense that you ended up with a horse you could ride. It also produced a great many animals that were permanently frightened of people, and a great many broken bones on the human side. Roberts's claim, essentially, was that the entire tradition was unnecessary. that you could get a better result faster without any of it. That is not a small claim. That is telling several million horsemen that their fathers and grandfathers had been doing it wrong, and you can imagine how that was received, which is where Windsor comes in. In 1989, Queen Elizabeth II invited him to demonstrate at Windsor. Now, understand what that invitation meant. She was not a casual enthusiast. She had been riding since early childhood. She bred and raced thoroughbreds for decades, and by universal agreement among people who knew her, horses were the subject on which her judgment was completely independent and completely respected. If she thought a method was nonsense, that was effectively the end of it in Britain. She watched, and she was convinced. And she told him that he must write a book. Now, that sentence has been reported a number of times, and I want to be careful about the exact wording, but the substance is agreed. She instructed him to write it down. He did. It was called The Man Who Listens to Horses. It became an international bestseller, and it started a global argument about the role of violence in the training of animals that is not entirely finished. But here is the part of the Windsor story I find most persuasive, and it is not about her at all. It is about a soldier. Corporal Major Terry Pendry was the senior riding instructor of the Household Cavalry at Windsor. He worked directly for the Queen. He was invited to watch the demonstration in 1989, and by his own account, he was thoroughly skeptical. He said the first day he saw it, he could not believe what he was looking at, and that he could not sleep that night. So he went back the next day, and the day after. He watched all 3 remaining days. Then he went to California to study the method properly. And by the time he spoke about it years later, he had used it on close to 800 horses. He described what it meant to him with a line I have not been able to improve on. He said working without it would be like a carpenter going to work without his saw. I like that testimony far more than any royal endorsement, because Pendry was a professional cavalry riding instructor with decades behind him. He had every reason to dismiss an American with no rope, and he did not. Now let us get to the soldiers, because that is what tonight is actually about. At some point, Roberts began applying the same work to people carrying trauma. He developed a 3-day program. He called it Horse Sense and Healing. It has been used with military veterans, with military police, and with young people in custody. And he has a phrase for what these people are carrying, which I think is better than most of the clinical language. He calls them hidden wounds. Now, I want to explain the reasoning, and then I want to be honest with you about the evidence, because those are 2 different things, and most coverage runs them together. Here is the reasoning. A horse is a prey animal. Its entire nervous system is built to detect threat, constantly, at very low levels. It reads your body before you have said a word. If you approach a horse while you are angry, or frightened, or holding something down hard inside yourself, the horse knows, and it will not settle. Which means you cannot fake it. You can walk into a room and tell a doctor you are fine. Men in particular are extraordinarily good at this, and men of a certain generation who served are the best at it in the world. You can say fine for 40 years and nobody can prove otherwise. You cannot say fine to a horse. The horse simply responds to what is actually going on in your body, and if you are not fine, it moves away. So the animal becomes a mirror. Roberts' own description is that horses act as a mirror for a person's emotions, and that people quickly learn to notice and manage what they are giving off, because there is instant and completely honest feedback. And then there is the join-up moment itself. Think about what that moment is. For somebody who has come home from a war and cannot trust anybody, including the people who love them. A large, powerful animal, which owes you nothing and which you cannot compel, decides on its own to come to you and stay with you. Roberts has described that moment as a potential catalyst, something that can restore a sense of hope and possibility as part of a recovery. I would put it slightly differently, and this is my opinion rather than his. I think it is being chosen, not tolerated, not managed, not put up with. Chosen by something that had every option to walk away. And I suspect that for somebody who has spent 5 years believing they are a burden to everybody around them, that is a very powerful 30 seconds. Now let me be honest with you about the evidence, because I am not going to sell you a miracle. Equine-assisted work of this kind has a real research literature, and it is a mixed one. There are studies showing meaningful reductions in symptoms. There are also studies that are small, that lack control groups, and that do not follow participants for long. Systematic reviews in this field have tended to conclude, politely, that the results are promising and that the quality of the research needs to improve. What that means in plain language is this. A great many people say it helped them enormously. The formal evidence that it works better than other things, for most people, is not yet strong. Both of those things can be true at once, and anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something. I would also say, and I think this matters, nobody serious in this field claims it replaces treatment. Roberts does not claim that. It is described as part of a recovery, not as the recovery. So please, if you are watching this because somebody in your family is struggling, do not hear me saying that a horse fixes it. Hear me saying that for some people, something happens in a round pen that had not happened in a consulting room, and that this is worth knowing about. Now let me give you a real person, because statistics are not persuasive and people are. There is a veteran called Owen McElroy. He is Canadian. He served over 14 years, including a deployment to Afghanistan as a vehicle technician. And he spent years going to doctors about his hearing. He could not hear his wife. He could not hear his children. In a crowded room, all the noise came at him at once and turned into a wall, and he could not pick anything out of it. They examined his ears. There was nothing structurally wrong with them at all. What his doctor eventually told him was that his post-traumatic stress meant his brain could not process all the incoming signals. His hearing was fine. The sorting was not. He joined a 10-week pilot program run between a university and a therapeutic riding center, 2 hours a week. A group of veterans grooming and walking and simply spending time with horses. He was matched with an Exmoor pony. He nicknamed it Big Ben, which tells you something about the man's sense of humor and about the size of an Exmoor pony. And this is what he said afterwards, and it is the detail that made me want to make this program. He said that he could suddenly tell the difference between the sound of a wheat field and the sound of wind moving through leaves. 2 sounds. Both of them soft, both of them rustling, and for years they had been part of the same undifferentiated wall of noise. And then they were 2 different things again. He said it was a moment that changed everything for him, and he said the program had helped him be a better husband and a better father. Now I cannot tell you the mechanism there. I do not know whether it was the horse, or the routine, or 2 hours a week outdoors, or being with other men who had been where he had been and did not need it explained. Probably all of it. That is usually the answer. But a man who could not hear his own children could hear them again, and it started in a barn. Which brings me to 2016 and to a British connection. In October of that year, it was reported that Prince Harry had asked to meet Monty Roberts to learn about this work, and that they would meet at Sandringham. Harry was 32. He had left the army the previous year after 10 years of service, including 2 tours of Afghanistan. He had by then founded the Invictus Games. Roberts said at the time that the prince had learned of the work and wanted a greater understanding of it, and that it would be an honor to show him. And he made a small remark, which I found rather funny and rather shrewd. He observed that it is always helpful when the British monarch is a fan. That is a man who understands exactly what happened to his career in 1989. Now, I want to be careful and clear. I have not been able to establish what came of that meeting, whether it led to any continuing program or what Harry did with it. Reporting on the meeting exists. Reporting on the outcome, so far as I can find, does not. So I am telling you it happened, and I am not going to build anything on top of it. Let me now come back to the Queen and to what her actual contribution was, because I think it is the most interesting thing in this whole story, and it is genuinely instructive. She did not invent Join Up. She did not develop the Veterans Program. She did not fund it, so far as anybody has published. What she did was watch a demonstration in 1989 and decide that it was real. And then she told a Californian horseman that he had to write a book, and she let it be known that she thought the method was worth taking seriously, and she let her own riding instructor go to California to learn it, and she kept the man as a trusted advisor on her horses for more than a quarter of a century. That is it. That is the whole intervention. And it was enough to move an idea from the fringes of the horse world into the mainstream, worldwide, permanently. I think that is worth sitting with, because it is a very precise illustration of what that particular job actually consists of. She had almost no power. That is the thing people get wrong about the British monarchy constantly. She could not pass a law, could not spend public money on a whim, could not direct a policy. What she had was attention. If she looked at something, the world looked at it. And over 70 years, she was extraordinarily disciplined about where she pointed it. Not at causes she was told to care about, at things she had actually seen and judged for herself. She saw a man calm a frightened horse without touching it, and she thought, that is real, and other people ought to know. There was a documentary made about the friendship, incidentally, called The Cowboy and the Queen. It had its world premiere in New York a couple of years ago, and by the account of the royal biographer Sally Bedell Smith, who was there, it is a moving film about a rather unlikely friendship between a Californian horseman and a British monarch. I mention it because if this program interests you, that is where I would send you next, and it is theirs rather than mine. Right. What we do not know. We do not know how many veterans have been through horse sense and healing, because I have not been able to find a published figure. We do not know what, if anything, the late Queen contributed privately. Her private charitable giving was exactly that, private, and it stayed private, and I am not going to speculate about it. We do not know what happened after Sandringham in 2016. And we do not know, in any rigorous sense, how well this works, for the reasons I set out earlier. Let me finish with the thing I have been circling all program. There is a particular kind of person who cannot be reached by being asked. You will know one. A father, a grandfather, an uncle, a husband. Somebody who came home from something and did not talk about it, and who has now not talked about it for 40 years, and who deflects every single time with a joke or a change of subject so smooth you almost admire it, and the harder anybody pushes, the further away he goes. Round the pen, at a steady trot, keeping the distance exactly the same. That is not stubbornness, and it is not coldness. It is the same instinct as the horse. Something happened, and the response was to keep moving and keep the distance, and it worked, so it never stopped. What Monty Roberts worked out, watching mustangs at the age of 12, is that you do not close that distance by chasing. You close it by making it safe, and then turning away and letting the other one decide. I think about that in relation to horses, and I think about it in relation to the men in my own family, and I do not think it is a coincidence that the method works on both. Every one of us has tried the other approach, the direct question at the kitchen table. Are you all right? What is wrong? Talk to me. And every one of us has watched the shoulders go up and the subject change. So here is my question tonight, and I read every single one of them. Is there somebody in your life you have never been able to reach? And has anything ever worked, even once, even partly? A drive where you were both looking at the road instead of at each other. A shed. A dog. A job you did side by side without talking. Because I have a strong suspicion that most of the answers are going to have that in common. Not sitting opposite somebody and asking. Standing beside them and waiting. If you found the thing that worked, please put it below, because somebody watching tonight has a father they cannot get to, and they have run out of ideas. And if you served, or if somebody you love did, thank you. I mean that plainly and without ceremony. If this was useful, subscribe. Everything here is sourced, and tonight I told you honestly where the evidence is strong and where it is thin, because you deserve that more than you deserve a miracle. I am Richard. Thank you for your company. Look after each other.